Have you ever used the expression, "You're really testing my patience"? Or have you ever had somebody say that to you? "Oh, you're really testing me." We have certain people in our lives that know exactly what to say that can test our patience. Either it's in what they say or what they do, or maybe just the way they look at us, the way they act, but they know exactly what they can do to test us. Or maybe you're one of those people that you know exactly what to do to test someone else. An expression often used is, you know exactly what buttons to press. You know exactly what things will upset me or what things will make me mad. Or you know exactly how to upset me but not go too far, but you know how to make me just the right amount of mad. And one thing that I can definitely say about myself is I'm one of those people. I know how to push buttons and to test people. And one thing I love about New Albany is that there's plenty of other people like that. Plenty of people that know what buttons to press and how to annoy people, how to get on people's nerves, how to test people. One particular instance I'm thinking about was with me and my mother. And if you know me and my mother, we love each other so much. I love my mom so much. But we love to bicker at each other and go back and forth and to pick on one another and to argue and try to one-up the other and, basically what I said, test the other person. And with it being my mother and me growing up with her, being around her, I know exactly what buttons I can push and exactly how to test her. And all of you mothers out there, maybe even fathers too, think that your kids are the exact same way. They know exactly how to test you. Well, this particular instance I'm thinking about was something that I did to my mother a lot, and that was to scare her. Either I'd pop out or jump out or run out or scream or, act like I was hurt and I wasn't, or just all kinds of different things. One day I came home from school and I walked into our basement door in the back and my mom was just vacuuming away. She was vacuuming so she didn't hear me open the door and she didn't hear me come in. And so I looked at her and I was like, okay, this is gonna be pretty easy. So I just screamed as loud as I could. And as soon as I did that, I think she almost just fainted. She completely just fell down and was terrified. But we have people that can test us, and maybe you're the person that can test certain things. And I've talked about that, started off with that for two different reasons. One of the reasons is we're going to look at a Bible story today. And it's one of those few stories in the Bible, to me, that can kind of test your faith. And there's a lot of situations, where you can obviously test your faith and try to be better. But I'm talking about it's one of those stories and one of those situations that it's kind of tough. And you kind of wonder why God did what he did, or it really challenges you and makes you think a little bit. But then also, I shared that thought because when God thinks about us and our relationship with him, and you think about people that they know exactly what button to push. And with our relationship with God, God doesn't want to have a button he can push. He doesn't want us to have a weakness. He doesn't want to say, well, this is the area that they're not going to be able to follow me correctly in, or this is the area that they can just be tested so easy. And what we've done these past few weeks during all these Wednesday devotionals is look at Bible characters who have gone through tests and trials. And I hope what they've done is make you better, make you more prepared for tests and trials, help you to look at them differently, and then help you to be better from them and to grow from them and to get through them. And today, I think we're going to look at one of the best stories in the Bible, and one of the stories that will just go perfect with this theme that we've been looking at. So Genesis chapter 22. Genesis 22 is what we're going to look at. And of me just saying Genesis 22, you probably know the story that we're going to look at. It's a very popular story. It's a story that's talked about a lot. But it's a story of where someone was met with a really difficult test. And I hope what we can do is look at this and be better from it. So Genesis 22, starting in verse 1, now it came to pass after these things that God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham, and he said, here I am. So think about everything that's gone on up to this point is God has already got Abraham to leave, to abandon everything and to go. And Abraham's been really faithful to God and done some great things. And here it is that God is going to test him again. It literally says that God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham, and he said, here I am. Verse 2, then he said, take now your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you. So Abraham rose early in the morning and saddled his donkey and took 2 of his young men with him and Isaac his son. And he split the wood for the burnt offering, and he arose and went to the place of which God had told him. Then on the 3rd day Abraham lifted his eyes and saw the place afar off. And Abraham said to his young men, "Stay here with the donkey. The lad and I will go yonder and worship, and he will come back to you." So Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on Isaac his son. And he took the fire in his hand and a knife, and the 2 of them went together. But Isaac spoke to Abraham his father and said, "My father." And he said, "Here I am, my son." And then he said, "Look, the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering?" And Abraham said, "My son, God will provide for himself the lamb for a burnt offering." So the 2 of them went together. Then they came to the place of God, of which God had told them. And Abraham built an altar there and placed the wood in order, and he bound Isaac his son and laid him on the altar upon the wood. And Abraham stretched out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, "Abraham, Abraham." So he said, "Here I am." And he said, "Do not lay your hand on the lad, or do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me." Then Abraham lifted his eyes and looked, and there behind him was a ram caught in the thicket by its thorns. So Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up for a burnt offering instead of his son. And Abraham called the name of the place, "The Lord will provide," as it is said to this day, "In the mount of the Lord it shall be provided." My first reaction from looking at this story is what I already mentioned. It's one of those stories that can really test your faith, and it can really make you think, why would God do this? Just in any situation, why would God want to try to force a parent to sacrifice their only child? And not even just our only child, just to sacrifice one of their children. And think about what Abraham had been through. Him and his wife had waited so long, and they didn't think it was going to happen. And this was the promised child that God had promised them, and they was able to have it. And you look at the story, and you can just kind of think, why would God do this? And as we think about tests and trials, we can also think in our own lives, and I know I have, God, why are you doing this? Why does this have to happen? Why is this your will? And we can't begin to understand why he wanted to do it. But I want to point out something that just immediately knocks this story out and makes my faith grow so much. As we look at this story and we say, why did God want Abraham to offer his only son? Well, what's crazy is, I hope it's something that came in your head, is God did the exact same thing. We look at this story and we think, why would God make someone do this? But he did the same thing. God offered up his only son. The reason this story is so powerful is, I know that I can't speak as a parent yet, but there's parents out there, and I hope I feel this the same way one day. But as a parent, you would much rather sacrifice yourself than your child. A decent parent anywhere would rather do that, would rather give up their life than have to give up their child's life. And that's what makes God's sacrifice with Jesus so amazing. It was definitely more tough for God to let Jesus go through that than it would have been for him to do it. And we look at this story, and that's what makes it so amazing about Abraham. And we know how great Abraham was and how faithful he was, is that this was Abraham's son. It was more painful for Abraham to go up to the mountain and to sacrifice Isaac than it would have been for him to sacrifice himself. And so you maybe ask the question, why me? Why is this happening? But understand that, God has suffered for us. And one thing that God wants, and I already mentioned this, how God doesn't want a button to push. God wants there to be nothing between us and him. Nothing. He doesn't want anything to be in the way. It doesn't matter if it's family. We know that Jesus said in the book of Matthew, I think it's chapter 10, verse 37, talking about how it's about our family is not more important than he is. And there should be nothing that gets in the way. Jesus even said, if your right arm causes you to sin, tear it out. If your eye causes you to sin, tear it out. If your leg causes you to sin, cut it off. There should be nothing that gets in the way. And when you look at this, what it makes me think about is my weaknesses. and the fact that there should be nothing getting in the way between me and God. And you think about going through tests and going through trials, is realistically, if we have the faith that we should have, we'll never go through any tests or trials, because there's nothing that could happen that could affect our relationship with God. And that's the kind of faith we have to have. I want to point out something about Abraham in this story. As you notice in this story, as there's no points of Abraham ever questioning it or turning away from it. He just said, here I am. God told him what to do. So the next day he rose up and he went and did it. And I think what's crazy is that even while he was taking his son up, think about being in Abraham's shoes. I would just be panicking, scared to death, shaking. We don't know what Abraham was doing. But obviously he never gave away what he was doing. You know, he didn't keep staring at Isaac. He wasn't crying on the way up there. And even when Isaac asked him, what are we going to do? We have all this stuff to offer, but we don't have the animal. And he said, the Lord will provide. And he kept his cool, and he didn't blow it, and he didn't reveal anything. That's how strong Abraham's faith was. And you think about who Abraham is and why this story is so valuable, is that Abraham's really the beginning of everything that was great through Jesus Christ. Obviously, the genealogy starts back to Adam and Eve, but the main focus was that it came from David and from Abraham and Isaac. Those are kind of the main focuses. And think about what God needed in Abraham, what he needed from him. There was nothing in between him and God. And what I hope you can confidently say is there's nothing in between you and God. Nothing that can test you. There's nothing that there's no button that can be pushed that can ruin your relationship with God. But if you're like me, there are some buttons. And there's some buttons that I need to get rid of, that I need to take away, and that I need to work on. And guess what? Once the one button goes away, once we grow older, once the world changes, there will be another button that will develop. And we should constantly be trying to be better and to grow and to be more faithful and have the kind of faith that Abraham had. Think about any test and trial that you can go through and know that if you have the faith you should have, that it shouldn't matter. None of it should matter. Thank you for listening.